What's up, all my plant lovers? Devin is here, and I'm here with one of my favorite plants in my houseplant jungle. That's the Philodendron Burle Marx. In particular, I have the variegated version, and then I have just the pure green version. The variegated version, of course, I have a little bit more of a tender soft spot for this one because the foliage is otherworldly. Some of the variegation is like comes in splotches. Some of it's like, you know, the whole leaf is just a little bit of yellow, a little bit of green. Some are like half green, half yellow. So fun, unlike any other plant that I have in my jungle. But also the pure green is just, it's tropical. It has pure perfection in its foliage. And that's one of the reasons why I love the Philodendron Burle Marx, is because really and truly, it's one of the most easy to grow plants that I have in my home. And the foliage always looks beautiful, and it has that tropical rainforest jungle energy that was one of the reasons why I fell in love with growing and collecting houseplants. So a little bit of history. The Philodendron Burle Marx. So what is Burle Marx? Is it a person? Is it just a specific epithet? What does it mean? Burle Marx is the surname of one of the most famous garden designers out of Brazil, a gentleman by the name of Roberto Burle Marx. He began creating gardens when he was quite young, in the early 1930s, and continued, for many decades, creating beautiful gardens across Brazil, in Venezuela, a couple in North America, a few in Europe, and a few more scattered throughout South America. And he was absolutely one of the most foremost garden designers, thinkers, garden artists during his time, and really kind of transitioned the garden landscape movement into a more modern kind of ideology. But don't be confused, like modern is not necessarily like, technologically like, disconnected from nature, not at all. He was exceptionally connected with nature. He studied in the rainforests in Brazil, collected thousands and thousands of plants while living and gardening in Brazil. Many plants are named after him, or many plants were either discovered by him, named after him, or both at the same time. He was one of the very first garden designers to use native plants, to really incorporate native plants into his garden designs. It really was not part of the trend in Europe, South America, North America. It just wasn't being done. And he was one of the very first garden designers to really start to use native plants in his garden designs. In Brazil, he had an awesome selection to choose from, of course, beautiful tropical plants like these. And he also was a huge conservationist, trying to put efforts into conserving the rainforests of Brazil before it was, while it was just starting to get destroyed. So we can thank him for a lot. Now I have, a cool book, Roberto Burle Marx, The Unnatural Art of the Garden. Let's take a look at a couple of his garden designs. Now here in North America, there's only one surviving garden design of his, and it happens to be not far from where I live in Longwood Gardens. It's one of the indoor gardens in the conservatory was designed by him. I don't really remember when it was, if it was like the 80s perhaps, but it is the only remaining garden design by him in North America. But there are still plenty dotted around the world, particularly in Brazil. So you can see some of the places where he would garden. Just really striking design style. Absolute tropical lushness where he was gardening. Look at those huge lily pads. Really fun, really cool. So part of his work was not just creating gardens, it was like public park design kind of missions. And probably the most famous thing that he did, I think for me at least, I would consider, would be the Copacabana beach. Many of us are familiar with what this looks like. So this was his design. So just to kind of bring it all around, he was an incredible designer. Many plants were named after him and discovered by him, including this Philodendron Burle Marx. Now, when it comes to growing this houseplant, it is one of the most easy, low-key plants that I have in my houseplant garden. We're familiar with the fact that philodendrons tend to not really care very much about what's going on. it's a plant that likes to be in the bright light. I'll show you guys here in a second where exactly I grow it in my houseplant garden so you get a better idea. But a room, an area that gets bright light, it doesn't need to be right in that southern facing window hogging all of the best sunlight. You save that for your succulents or some of your other sun-loving plants you have inside. So bright light, water, when it's dry, about once a week is all that I water it. Now, the thing that I find most important with growing this philodendron, it really needs to be root bound in order to grow well. So I have had this plant for a few years now, and for the first couple years, it was, not much, it was in this pot, but not much bigger than this plant. And it took like 2 years to really start to take off because it really didn't have any. When they're not root bound, they really don't have like much desire to actually expand and produce new foliage. Now, once they start to get root bound, they really start to take off. So this plant is absolutely filling out this pot with its roots. And you can start to see that it's a plant that kind of like, it will overflow wherever you're growing, but it can also, I could put a moss pole in here, a dowel rod in here, and train it to grow climbing up that. So it can kind of ramble. This would be kind of like a rambly nature or kind of a climbing nature, whatever you desire. But one thing you should definitely note is that where you have it growing, it will search for the sun. So if you want a nice, well-rounded plant, you're gonna wanna twist, give it a little quarter twist every once in a while to get it kind of exposed to the sunlight all around. For me, I actually love that it grew kind of all in one direction, and I specifically did that so that it would kind of have this really otherworldly kind of look about it. So I think that's really fun, a really fun thing about this plant. In terms of fertilizing it, it's a really low-key plant. With fertilizing, what I use for all of my houseplants, this is the Roberta's Bounty fertilizer, and it's very easy. I use it about once a month, maybe twice a month if I'm doing a good job. And it's, you mix a spoonful of this with a gallon of water, and then you mix it up and you water your plants like normal. Very, very easy. So another thing that I love about this plant and other philodendrons, to be honest, is that they remain quite impervious to pests. I have tons of anthurium over in my houseplant jungle. I get aphids, pretty regularly on those, and that's kind of a hassle. Spider mites at times, but this one in particularly stays pretty true. It stays pretty healthy, pretty sturdy, and I've never had to put it into a quarantine and spray it down with any sort of insecticidal soap. It has remained free and clear of pests from 4 different homes that I've lived in over the last 3 years, and it's doing phenomenally. So as you can see, some of the variegation is pretty concentrated in one section. So that's actually pretty normal. If you have a plant that's creating new growth points, it's oftentimes, you may find that one of those growth points will only create like it'll kind of revert back to the true all green form. So if you want to retain the variegated look, what you need to do is kind of cut away those all green sections and just really start to put a lot of the effort and focus on those variegated sections. Alternatively, what you can also do is propagate those variegated sections so that you have plants that are just purely variegated areas, and then really start to kind of create a new plant that is just of the variegated form, and maybe let your mother plant do its thing. That's kind of what I'm doing, and that's what I'm going to show you guys how to propagate this. Very, very easy. So if you saw my video when I was down in Miami about 6 months ago, you would have seen that I had taken a cutting of this. I got a cutting of this. My hotel was like, oh yeah, go ahead, take a cutting. They had it growing as a wonderful ground cover in the front of the hotel. And they said, oh yeah, we don't care, go ahead and take a cutting. So I did, and I brought it back with me. So in that video, you can see basically how to wrap cuttings and bring it with you on your travels. Very, very easy. Anyways, so this was this has rooted and grown twice its size over. Let's see if I can get this guy out. There we go. It has rooted and grown twice its size. Now you can see this is a wonderful size plant for this container. Like I was saying, they need to be root bound. If you take anything away from this video, that should be it. Small 3.5-inch container for a plant about twice as big. So that's great. Look at that foliage, it's so beautiful. Oh yeah, if you're wondering why these, the foliage looks like kind of arrow-shaped, these are in fact an aroid, which means they're a member of the Araceae, the arrow leaf family, arrow-shaped leaf family with anthuriums, monstera, pothos, all those other wonderful tropical houseplants that we love. Anyways, so this was a propagation that I did back in January, and now it's a wonderful plant, and now I have 2 of them. So let me show you guys how to propagate these. Very simple. Okay, so this right here is a perfect example. You can see this stem right here looks like it's going to be variegated. I have this like whitish leaf, so that's a good sign that this little section is going to be variegated. Very important to note. And right here you can see this is one leaf node, and then here's another leaf node. So this is a really perfect spot to take a cutting. You always want to cut. When you're taking these cuttings, you need to include a leaf node in the cutting, and if you can cut it just above another leaf node, then essentially you can encourage branching to occur out of that leaf node that is remaining on that mother plant. So once you have selected your place, we're going to take a nice cut just like this. Perfect. Okay, so once you have your cutting, there's really 2 ways that you can get them started. I think the easiest way for most of us would just be taking a glass of water and just plopping it in. Now you can see this is an aerial root forming off of this stem, so I'm going to include that in the water, and that's perfect just like that. The other way that you can do it, if you do have a heating pad like I do, these are about 15 bucks. You can just check the link down in my Amazon shop below to find these. These are worth their weight in gold. You can put that cutting directly in soil, moistened soil, and put it on the heating pad, and it will root within about 2 weeks. So that might bring the question, what is the best soil to use for this Burle Marx philodendron? And the answer would be check the link for my soil mix video. It's very easy. These are like very nice, porous, well-draining mixes. It's about 50% potting mix, and then the other 50% is split between perlite, orchid bark, horticultural charcoal, and sphagnum moss. So that gives a really nice, well-draining, but soil retentive mix. So I often get questions about where to put cuttings that are being propagated, and the answer is they don't need to be in a bright sunny location like the plant. They can be in a rather darker location. So for me, I love putting cuttings up here in my kitchen. It doesn't get hardly any natural light, but it's not the lighting that's really going to activate the root formation. It's just being in a warm environment. So warmth is a key, hence the heating pad that I was showing earlier. If you do put it directly in soil, you need to give it the heat or else it can absolutely rot. So this is where I will keep it, and then I will return when it is time to plant it back up. Okay, so let me show you guys where I actually am growing mine. So over here, that's an eastern facing window, and I put it right up here and I let it overflow. Now you can see I have a couple of those grow lights over there in the corner, and those are kind of situated, one of them is situated right on my plant, and that absolutely helps it to grow even faster. If you have the opportunity to use a grow light, it's really just important for the winter time if you want to have continual growth all year round. If that's not so important to you, then it doesn't matter. In the summertime, it's really doesn't help much, but I keep it on anyway because it makes me feel good. Anyways, I'll be back when the cutting has rooted, and then I'll show you guys how to plant it up. And that's about it. All right, see you in a sec. All right, guys, it's been a little over a month. Our propagation has started to produce some roots. So let me show you guys. And just if you are wondering why my energy is a little bit low, I'm in the middle of a 5-day water fast. I'm on day 3 right now. Planning on making a YouTube video about it, so stay tuned. A little different than the normal videos I make, but part of my lifestyle, so thought I'd share. So you can see this nice root was an aerial root, but since it's been in the water, it's created all this extra growth. And then this aerial root is starting to form some roots right here as well. So that means that these guys should be all really nice and ready to be transplanted into the soil. So I have my pot of fresh soil. Now I'm using my aeroid soil mix, which you can find up at the corner of the video. You can find a link to that video showing how I make my own mix. It's super easy to make, and I always have it on hand. In fact, it's in this blue bin underneath here. So I got my soil in the pot. I pre-moistened it. It's nice and moist, nice and wet. I find that's the best way to get your propagations set in the soil with ease so that they don't move around. So you have my like metal chopstick. I'm just kind of making a nice hole in there so I can fit that entire node in there. So now I'm going to take the node, I'm going to bury it in just like that. I'm also going to take this aerial root and get it in there as well. Now I'll pat it back down. And because it's already nice and moist, I don't need to add any extra water. All right, so now I have a brand new Burle Marx variegata little plant. And as we remember, it's so important to keep these plants in small containers until they have a really good chance to root out the entire size of that container. You never want to let our aeroids, our philodendrons, kind of swim in a lot of soil until they have a really nice, great root system. So we're gonna keep this guy in here probably for the next 6 months or more. I'm gonna place him on this nice tray, put him over here in the sunny window, and let him do his thing and grow. Anyways, thank you guys for joining me here on Plant Vibrations with me, Devin Wallin. If you have any other further questions, make sure to leave a comment. I do my best to answer every single comment. I also have some new shirts and kind of merchandise on my YouTube channel. You can find just at the top bar where you have like videos, playlists. There's a new little slot that says store. Some Plant Vibrations t-shirt designs that I created. So go take a look. Maybe you'll find a nice t-shirt for yourself or for a plant lover in your life. Anyways, stay tuned as we're uploading fun, long videos like this every Sunday, and then we do some of our YouTube shorts throughout the week. All right, guys, I will catch you soon. Ciao.